Welcome back to Music Theory Logic. Andrew here, and today is another long-awaited music theory breakdown. This one was a little bit harder than I was expecting. Thanks to Random User for the request. We're going to be talking about Stop Trying to Be God from Travis Scott, featuring James Blake, Kid Cudi, and Stevie Wonder. Some pretty incredible features. Thank you for the request. If you have any requests yourself for tracks you'd like to see me recreate and talk about some music theory, let me know in the comments. Let's go ahead into the session. So here we are in my recreation. I'm going to first play the instrumental. It's a consolidated arrangement, meaning I'm not going to go back to the verse and like have it go as long because I don't have any vocals. I don't have the rights to any of the instrumentals. So like I have recreated every individual layer. The mix and the sound selection is not fully on point, but again, I don't own the rights to this track. And my main goal is to show you music theory. If you find this stuff helpful, you'd help me out a lot by subscribing to the channel, maybe share it to social media, anything you can do, I greatly appreciate it. Without further ado, here's my recreation of Stop Trying to Be God by Travis Scott. Going straight into the bridge or ending of the song. All right, cool. So again, sound selection mix isn't nearly as good as the song, and one of the things that made this one a tough one to do is it's got this real like low pass sound to it. So you might have noticed this is on the master chain, so all the audio is going through this. I am cutting out a ton of 1100 and up hertz, and I kind of rolled that off for the ending part. And because the instrumental has that like sort of filter sound, it makes it a lot harder to actually like pick out the notes and everything. The solo at the end is super cool. I will talk about that. It's pretty free flowing. It sounds like just a ripping keyboard player that is just like freestyling, playing on top. Perhaps Stevie Wonder did that. It'd be pretty epic. So let's talk about some music theory. This is going to seem confusing, but bear with me. This is in the key of B Phrygian. Now, Phrygian is a musical mode. A mode is a scale. We typically talk about two main kinds of modes in modern music theory. That is like major scales and minor scales. Major scales are also called Ionian modes, and minor scales are also called Aeolian modes. I always, when I'm thinking about music theory and I'm thinking about scales, I always like to think of the simplest version of said scale. So if you're on a piano or you have a keyboard in front of you and you play E to E, white keys, that is going to be your Phrygian formula or the most basic Phrygian scale. Now, if we compare that E Phrygian to E minor, the only one note that is different is the second note. So in the key of B minor, we would find a C sharp. In the key of B Phrygian, we find C natural. That scale on its own sounds like this. Cool. Now that gives us some different harmonies because, again, basically every chord that has the second degree or that C in it, or would have been a C sharp in B minor, is going to be different based on that note. So that means our 1 chord is still minor. Our 2 chord is major. So that's a C major chord. Our 7 chord is essentially a minor chord. So that is going to be different than your natural minor as well. And then our, 3 chord is major still. Cool. Those sound like this. Cool. And so, like, basically everything that we, all the chords, all the melodies, like everything that we're going to find, except for one thing that happens at the end of the keyboard solo, is one of those notes. All right, cool. So let's go through the individual layers. Now I'll just kind of solo out. Here's the first synth I had. All right, so it's playing B, then B and D. So just an arpeggio, the 1 chord in E. So E down to A. So 4, then 7. And again, we find that C natural. So making that like an A minor chord. So it's basically a B minor, an E minor, and an A minor. All right, so all minor chords gives it kind of a slightly even darker sound than if it was going to be a natural minor, because we would find that C, that 7 chord would be major. All right, so here's a secondary layer I have. That one's important for the delay. So the sound design on this track, if I had to like pick one thing that's like the most interesting part to me about Travis Scott's music, it's the sound design, the production, not just on the vocals, but like the whole instrumental. There's all sorts of cool, trippy stuff happening. Now, the next thing I did was I got this reverse layer. Also here, back to sound design, some reverses. All right, so basically what I did was I bounced this top layer, I chopped it up, and I reversed individual segments. Again, not really changing any notes, just like making the sound design more interesting. All right, the drums. We have the same sequence. It's a 4-bar pattern of drums happening the entire song. Some of the terms we have before we're on a halftime backbeat. Syncopated, I should mention I'm at 150 beats per minute, so a halftime backbeat makes sense. All right, sounds super filtered because the drums are extra filtered in the beginning and then they come in when the verse happens. So again, if we look at that, this middle one is our snare. Again, a halftime backbeat, so that's on beat 3. Bottom layers are kick drum. We're going kick on 1, kick on the 2nd quarter note, syncopated 2nd measure, so kick on the 2nd 8th note, kick on the 4th quarter note. That pattern basically repeats, except for at the end, the kick drum isn't on the 4th quarter note, it's on the 8th note after that. All right, cool. This top layer, if I were to look at these, the bottom one of those is the closed hi-hat, the top one is the open hi-hat. So we get this open hi-hat on beat 2 of every other measure. That's a huge part of the sound. The cymbals, we got this sort of trap thing going on, so like 8th notes, syncopated 2nd 8th note, some fast 32nd note trills, going back to our 8th notes. Get, again, some of those 32nd note trills. Awesome. So the drums, let's solo that on its own. Cool. Let's talk about the bass line and then hear that with our drums. So our bass line is doing the same notes that we had before with just a little bit of a fill and more rhythm. We're starting on the 1, the B. So a B, B, syncopated B, B, 2/8 notes, B, and then we get that flat second as we would compare it to the minor scale or that C natural. On our way to the 4, the E, down to the 7, the A, and then we come back to the B on the last 8th note. With the drums, that sounds like this. All right, cool. And that takes care of everything until the end of that part of the song. So like 2 minutes in, we start to hear this violin. That all together, I'll play it, sounds like this. All right, so note-wise, pretty simple. Going a B, it's like some sort of stringed instrument. I think I'm using a violin. B up to B, so up an octave. And then we do this run, F sharp, G, A. Stop changing the note. Cool, so let's see why I did this. So I have this channel, which was Opus. That's probably why I printed it. So this is the East-West Instruments, so it's really taxing on my computer, so I printed it in place, and then that also allowed me to affect it. I'm using a little altar boy, pushing down the formants and the pitch up. I am putting it through a guitar amp. I am then adding delay. And finally, I'm going back through little altar boy so that I can add down an octave subtly in the mix, and using that plugin to gain stage or add some drive at the end. All right, cool. So that basically covers everything until the outro. And whoever requested this song, perhaps it was purposefully requested as a challenge, just because it changes a lot and it gets actually really interesting. I almost started filming the video before I even got to this section, and I'm glad I did not. So everything changes. If you're familiar with the song, you will know the part that I'm talking about. It goes to this much sort of more interesting musical section where it's going to be 16 measures of chords. It starts out on the minor 7, the A minor. We get A and D, so not the full harmony, kind of outlining a either like a D major chord basically. Then we go to our 1, our B minor. So here's that 1. The 2, C major chord. Top part of the C major. 1 chord. Major 2. 1 chord. Major 2. 1 chord. Finally to the major 2. So all of that repeats, that chord progression. Again, I think it's super cool how the song just like changes up. Our bass line is doing the same thing until the end. There's this like cool run up. We hear that bass. So the slide up, I'm using Native Instruments Razor. I turned up my glide. It only affects the notes that are overlapping, and that's how I get the bend there at the end. Cool, so final thing to talk about, and it's kind of a complicated one, which is our main solo. So let's get everything going here. And I'll basically outline what is happening and kind of talk about how you could write something like this. So this sounds like they've got somebody, a great keyboard player, who's just freestyling over the chord progression that I just mentioned. When they're freestyling, they are not playing a single note that's outside of the key until we go to this high part and we get this 2 into the 2 up. Anytime we use 2 notes like that, that are next to each other. In the voicing, it's going to sound dissonant. 2, that C sharp is out of key, so you'll notice that when we get to that part, it sounds like a little clashing, or like there's more tension. I could name out every individual note, but again, aside from the ones I just mentioned, we're not using anything that's not from your key. And creating stuff like this is really fun because there's no drums, so rhythmically it's a lot more free. 2, there's not a lot of repetition, so it really creates like the feeling of the solo. So let's watch this and play it along. That minor out of key. You can really tell. All right, so final things I will say about this. If you do a solo like this that's super free and all over the place, if you incorporate things from like the hook vocal or other musical ideas that happen in the song, it's going to work a lot better. I hear this riff right here. We hear it at the beginning of the solo and the end as the sort of stop trying to be God. A little bit of that melody. But cool. Hopefully this helped. Again, this was a challenge. A lot of times when I finish these, I'm like a lot more confident or just like feel like I killed it. But on this one, it was just a real challenge figuring it out because of the filtered sound of the instrumental, the interesting sound design, and the moving of the whole instrumental. But for those reasons, I also think it was pretty rewarding in doing it. So thank you, random user. If you have any songs you'd like me to break down, let me know in the comments. I've got another one I'm going to work on for WebZH, hopefully today. It's going to be some more Dr. Dre, I believe. Yeah, have a wonderful day. Enjoy music. And yeah, if you find this helpful, subscribe to the channel. Once again, I'm Andrew. Thank you for hanging out with me. Till next time.